Susan Sarandon last night was on MSNBC. She was being interviewed by Chris Hayes and made a comment that's frankly surprised me. Although, you know, I understand the ideology behind it. I just don't think it's how American politics works or is going to work. But, you know, I could be wrong. Basically, she had said, first of all, she gave this full-throated endorsement of Bernie and took a few shots at Hillary. And then Chris Hayes said, are you going to vote for her? You know, if she's the nominee. And she said, I think Bernie would probably encourage people to do that because he doesn't have any ego. I think a lot of people are sorry. I can't bring myself to do that. And he said, how about you personally? And she said, I don't know. I'm going to see what happens. And he said, really? And she said, yeah, really. And he said, well, I can't believe if you're watching Donald Trump. And she said, some people feel Donald Trump will bring the revolution immediately. If he gets in, then things will really, explode. Now, she went on to say, when Chris Hayes said, isn't that kind of a dangerous argument, basically? She said the status quo is not working. And I think it's dangerous to think that we can continue the way we are with a militarized police force, with privatized prisons, with a death penalty, with a low minimum wage, with threats to women's rights, and to think that you can't do something huge to turn that around. Now, I've heard this argument in the context of 1976. I've heard this argument. Frankly, I've been hearing this argument since I was, 16, 17 years old in SDS in East Lansing, which is, when Reagan gets elected, I mean, actually, this is long before Reagan. If Nixon gets elected, it'll bring the revolution because everybody will realize he's a corrupt SOB and, And no, it didn't bring the revolution. And Reagan didn't bring the revolution. And George W. Bush. And even after 1 million people were out in the streets in the winter of 2002, 2003, before he invaded Iraq in the spring of 2003, it didn't bring the revolution. The revolution isn't coming. At least not as some giant bursting thing. The revolution is already underway. And the revolution is a revolt, frankly, against Reaganism on the Republican side and DLC third wayism on the Democratic side. And it is increasingly being embraced even by, quote, establishment politicians and individuals. It seems to me that the what we need to be doing is focusing on building that movement. It's not about an individual candidate. It's about changing how badly broken the system is. And let's tell the truth here. This system, the political and economic system in the United States were not broken by accident. It was intentional. Reagan's basically merging of government and corporate interests. And you see this writ large in our military. George W. Bush put this on steroids when we went into Afghanistan and Iraq. And now, over 40% of the NSA's budget is going to private contractors. I don't know what the percentage is of the Pentagon's budget, but it's huge. We need to bring back a military that just does its own work. The Kitchen Patrol, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Construction Corps. Why are we hiring private contractors and paying them $150,000 a year to cook for people when you've got GIs who will do that? And the reason why, of course, is very simple. Because the companies that are being hired to pay that cook $150,000 a year to cook in Iraq, that company that's being hired is making massive campaign contributions to the politicians that are making sure that they get the contract. The system is that corrupted. But it's that corrupted because wealthy people bought politicians A process, by the way, facilitated hugely by the Supreme Court in a series of decisions from 1976, Buckley versus Vallejo, to 2010, Citizens United, to 2012 or 13, the McCutcheon case. And, parts of this go all the way back to 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. But the reality is that our political system has been corrupted by our business system. And in turn, our business system has been corrupted by our political system to the point that business in the United States is no longer competitive. Business in the United States is now largely monopolistic. And much of that is facilitated by the government through patent and copyright laws, for example, that are way more generous than they should be. Part of that is facilitated by our government, by Ronald Reagan in 1982, saying essentially he was no longer going to enforce, or at least in any consequential way, the Sherman Antitrust Act. And so as a result of that, you saw this explosion of mergers and acquisitions that continues to this day. $5 trillion worth of acquisitions last year worldwide. And the result of that is that we have both an economic system which is broken and a political system which is broken. And I chronicle the rise of this whole thing from the Powell memo in 71 to Lewis Powell being put on the Supreme Court in 72 to Lewis Powell writing the Buckley decision in 1976 through Citizens United and everything else in my book, The Crash of 2016, by way of saying that politics being corrupted by business and business being, being corrupted by politicians, allowing them to behave in a way that over the short term is very profitable, makes a lot of people very rich, or at least a small number of people very rich, but over the long term sets our economy up for a massive crash and destroys the middle class, that's not a good thing. And it's not a good thing, not just for the obvious and moral reason that inequality is not good. And it's not a good thing, not just for the velocity of money argument that as you take away money from the bottom half of or the bottom 90% of the economic class in the United States, what you do is you actually slow down the velocity of money through our economy because they're not spending money. In many cases, they're borrowing money to just keep their heads above water, but they're not spending money that they're earning. And the top 10%, by and large, are saving their money. They're not spending their money. I mean, how many, as Thom, what's his last name? The Patriotic Millionaires guy said on this show, like about a year ago, one of the founders of the Patriotic Millionaires, he said, how many pairs of pants do I need? Do I need 10,000 pairs of pants? I make 10,000. I make 10,000 times what you make every month. But we both, need, what? 2, 3, 4 pairs of pants, period. I mean, what do you need? I don't need to buy 10,000 pairs of pants. And so you can make that economic argument. So you can make the moral argument, you can make the economic argument. But I think the biggest argument you can make is that this corrupted system, both politically and economically, is going to crash. And a lot of people are going to get badly hurt when it crashed. And a small number of people are going to get very rich off the crash. But it doesn't need to be this way. What we're looking at right now is the cancer stage of capitalism. And that didn't have to be. FDR figured out this balance. And from the 1930s until the 1980s, when we lived in the FDR-onomics era, our economy worked for pretty much everybody, or at least pretty much everybody who was white. And now you've got, progressive economists and progressive politicians saying, let's make it work for everybody, including people who aren't white. We can do this. And by the way, it's a healthier thing for our small d democracy, as well as our economy and our people.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So back to Susan Sarandon. I don't think that revolution happens because you put Donald Trump in the White House. I think it happens because all of us get engaged in politics.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.